Welcome to Season 3 of the Empowering Women podcast, a production of the Empowering Women in Industry organization. Together, we will hear from ambitious and inspiring career women as they share their stories of success and overcoming career challenges. I'm Charlie Matthews, founder of Empowering Women, and I am proud to introduce our host, Shannon Bumgarner from Femspired.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Empowering Women podcast. We have another exciting and fascinating episode for you today. And I am really just intrigued to introduce to you Michelle Gymiah, who is a gender and ethnicity pay gaps consultant. And Michelle has over 12 years of experience working at the Equality and Human Rights Commission, supporting all types of employers. And I'm really also excited because I've tried to learn more about negotiation. She teaches negotiation skills to ambitious women who want to hold braver conversations about money and progression to further their careers. She wants to help you skyrocket your business if you're an entrepreneur, and more importantly, close those gender and ethnicity pay gaps. So, Michelle, I am delighted to have you today. Welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Very exciting.
It is. And I know our audience is really intrigued. Gender pay gaps is something that I take very seriously, especially in the area of STEM. I think we have some work to do. So I really want to start with your story, Michelle. That's where I always love to start the podcast, is your story. So let's talk a little bit. How did you get from Manchester University to the Equality and Human Rights Commission, and then eventually to founding your own company of Equality Pays?
Yeah. So I don't know. I guess like equality and human rights was something that I kind of fell into accidentally. I
Oh,
don't know about
okay.
you. I don't know about you, but when you go to university, you don't really know what you want to do, so you kind of pick subjects that interest you, and anything to do with equality and diversity and human rights, they were the kind of modules that I really enjoyed working on. And I saw an advert to work at the Equality and Human Rights Commission. And you know, when you don't really know what you want and then suddenly it's presented in front of you, I was like, oh, yeah, that is exactly what I want to do. So I applied, I applied to work there, and I got in, which I was really, really pleased about. And I basically worked my way up. And it's really interesting because I was, as we say in the UK, wet behind the ears. I was
Right.
young, pretty naive. I didn't really know anything about anything, even though I thought
You
I
thought, so I think I want to do this, but let's just see what happens, right?
yeah, exactly. So I basically fell into this, it felt like an alternative universe whereby I was suddenly learning about discrimination, equality, diversity, etc. And some of the pieces were starting to fall in place for me of experiences I'd had in the workplace, but I thought were normal. And then I was in this workplace where I was talking to employers about the Equality Act, talking about gender discrimination, etc. And then I suddenly realized, oh, some of these things have happened to me, but I just took them as it's just a rite of passage. This is just what happens in the workplace. And so so I really was learning on the job about the subject, as well as kind of recognizing times where, I had definitely been held back in my career, or there were, pay gap issues and I didn't know how to address them. I didn't know they were a thing. So I fell into it by accident, but I always say it's a happy accident because it's totally the work that I love to do. And then I decided, after about 12 years of working with employers and running workshops and seminars, etc., I wanted to do much more hands-on work. So that's when I decided to go freelance. And it's really interesting because in the work that I was doing, I became the kind of go-to person for all of my friends. So they'd be like, oh, I've just come back off maternity leave and I want to talk to my employer about changing my hours. And they said that I can't. Is that right? So I was like giving like impromptu advice to lots of friends. And I realized after a while, not everybody knows this stuff. Not everybody knows what their rights are. Not everybody knows about pay gaps and negotiation. And I thought, well, and I really enjoy providing this advice to friends, but I just kind of thought, I think there might be a business angle here as well, because
Sure.
the people I'm talking to, my friends, and I consider them to be smart, ambitious women. And I was a bit like, how do you not know this? And then I was like, oh, for the very same reason I didn't know any of this stuff
Right,
before I
exactly.
started this work, right? So I thought, well, if they don't know, how many other women are out there that don't know about these things and can't advocate for themselves because they don't have that information around what they can and can't ask for. So I started testing the waters out to see if people would like coaching around, negotiation and self advocacy conversations at work. And, turns out there is a big market for it because there are so many people who don't know anything about it or have an inkling, but they don't feel confident enough. They're not sure if it's okay to ask for more. So again, happy accident that I fell into.
Yeah, but what you just said really intrigued me is that you obviously found something about that advertisement that you applied for. But what really intrigued me was you said you've experienced some of these in your own journey and you didn't even realize it at the time. Michelle, is there one instance you'd feel comfortable sharing with our audience that you experienced that was kind of a later aha moment once you dug deeper into the field?
Oh yeah, there's this, and I think about this often. So I was working for a small charity, and I was the administrator. So I'd sit in the front office, and I would deal with supporting the other project managers for all the different projects that were happening. And I used to sit next to the lady who did all the accounts, and we were really good friends.
Hmm,
And she said to me one day, she said, Michelle, your predecessor got paid more than you. Do you know that? And I was like, no. She's like, oh, yeah, come and have a look at the figure. She's like, I probably shouldn't be showing you this, but I'll show you. So she showed me that my predecessor, who was a white man, was paid more than I was paid. And I remember just kind of freezing that information. And I just treated it as, oh, that's nice to know. And I just went, oh, right. Okay. Thank you. Thanks for telling me. And I didn't do anything about it. And looking back, I realized what was happening. So I was quite young. And so, when you're young, you don't like to rock the boat.
sure.
You just kind of like do as you're told because you're in the workplace, you're there to learn. I was on really friendly terms with my boss, who had promoted me from an administrative role to a project assistant role. And I was scared of having that conversation, despite the fact that
Sure.
we talked about all sorts of different things and we got on really, really well. I was terrified of saying, you know what? I've just found out that my predecessor got more than me. Why is that? Or, can I have a pay rise? And what I started to do is I started to internalize why that might be the case. And I started to say to myself, well, he's older than me, so he deserves more money. And well, he's probably got much more experience. And you're really young and you're lucky that you've got this promotion, you've got
Mm.
a tiny pay rise, all so I was telling myself all these
Yeah, I
stories.
think that's a typical one for women, right? We say, "Oh, I'm just lucky or fortunate to be in whatever position." And we use that to diminish what we really bring to the table.
Yeah, totally. And that was what I did, and it was never mentioned again. My friend was like, "Okay, I've given her the information. She's decided to do nothing with it. I've done my part." And I think about that so much, And in reality, maybe there was justification because he did have previous experience, whereas I hadn't. But I'll never know if that was actually the case. I'll never know if I could have pushed for more pay because I simply didn't ask.
Yeah, and you didn't ask, and then in many cases, you actually had the information. And as you know, because you spend every day here, many cases women don't even have that information, right? To push back or to ask, or maybe to have the impetuous to ask. Yeah.
Yeah, totally, totally.
So that really kind of blends me well into my next question. This episode will air in September, which is International Gender Equity Pay Day, is in the month of September. And I really couldn't think of a more timely topic with what some people have termed the she session. So
Mm.
with so many women leaving the workforce, what do you think some of the top challenges are to gender pay equity? And second question after that, have these changed over time or have they remained relatively the same?
I think the challenges around gender pay equity, as you call it in the States, I think they're twofold. The first is around it being something systematic.
Mm,
And the second is around also it being personal. So systematically, when you look at the workplace, how it was put together, who it was put together for, it was never put together for the likes of you and me in
mm,
mind. It was designed in such a way where one person would be the breadwinner, and by default, that would be a man. And then you'd have somebody who would take care of everything else, and by default, that would be women. And so, the workplace is set up in a way where, an employer can make so many demands of that breadwinner because technically they haven't got anything else to do outside of the workplace. That doesn't work for so many of us, not just women, but particularly women. That just doesn't work because there are
right.
additional responsibilities, additional things that we want to do. Whether you have children or caring responsibilities or not, you may want flexibility for mental health reasons or physical health reasons, all sorts of
Right.
things. And the workplace just is not designed for that at all. So
And it
when we're
really doesn't
looking,
benefit men either in this new
it
world,
does
right?
not.
Because there's a
Exactly.
lot more, I'm going to call it co-parenting. That's probably the wrong term, but men maybe want paternity leave. They want to have more activities with their family, and it doesn't really benefit them either.
No, it doesn't. And the stigma is there for those men who do want it. So women are stigmatized for wanting it, and the penalty is a gender pay gap in terms of not being offered lucrative roles, having responsibility taken off you. You're being told to trade flexibility for money, for example. And then it, like you say, it doesn't benefit men either because then there's the stigma of, well, are you sure that you want to, lessen your hours? You have children, you have to think about, being the breadwinner and stepping up into that role. Or, no, there's no flexibility at this level of the organization, so it's take it or leave it.
Mm,
So it doesn't work for so many people for so many reasons. So it's a real systematic challenge in trying to flip the script in terms of focusing on productivity and output as opposed to presenteeism and the idea
mm.
of you can only be productive, you're only really working if you're in the office, if you're being micromanaged, if we can see you at your desk doing whatever it is that your job
It's
entails.
really interesting that you say that because I've been reading a lot of the articles on, at least here in the United States, work from home. Because as you know, we become more and more vaccinated here in the US. So the conversation's becoming more and more about coming back to the office. And there was one article that said that women could be more disadvantaged in that particular respect because it's more likely that a woman would want to work less from the office versus a man. That was I guess, the theory in this article, and that it would disadvantage women because they wouldn't be seen present in the workplace versus men who would be more likely to be present in the workplace. So
Yeah,
back to your point, I found that really interesting.
yeah, and we've been seeing the same things here, in
Okay.
Europe and in the UK in terms of those conversations. And the thing that I always think, well, why is it being presented like this? Why is it not being presented as an opportunity to reframe how we do work? Why is it
Exactly.
presented as an opportunity to think, okay, well, just because somebody chooses not to be in the office 5 days a week doesn't mean that they're not committed to their role. It just means that maybe they want to work differently or work in a smarter way. And again, it's about focusing on what's the end result. And I do think there is an element of fear for organizations because this is the way that the system has been set up. It's the foundation of how they do
Mm,
everything in terms of recruitment, reward, bonuses, who gets promotions, who, goes into leadership roles. It's all based on this foundation of if I see you or if I can see you, I can ensure that you are working. But what we're asking for is something different. We're asking for people to trust us, to allow us to use technology in different ways, to show up to do work, but in a different way, to trust that because you can't see me all the time doesn't mean that I'm not doing any work. So, going back to what, the first part of the
right.
question, this is the challenge. It's challenging the system, the way that work is set up. And then the
Right. And the
second part,
system's pushing back really hard right now, right?
yes, exactly, exactly.
Yep.
And part of the system, being the way that it is that in the past, we just kind of had to put up. And you might have had situations where individual people would push back and ask for things, and they may get it, they may not. But COVID is changing things because now we're having swathes of people saying, well, hold up. I was told that the way to work was like this. And you've managed to give me flexibility. You've managed to give me the things that you said no to before. So going forward, we need to have a negotiation conversation around
Right.
what extra looks like for me now
Yeah.
that I know that it's possible. Yeah. Whereas before I was told, no,
Yeah.
totally impossible. It's not going to happen.
Well, and it's actually proven to be possible on a wide scale, right?
Yeah.
We got thrown into that situation. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you said
Yeah.
that was one. What was the second one you had on your mind as maybe
Yes.
influencing this as well?
So the second piece was around the personal aspect, and this is what I like to call the kind of inherited bias. So you have the system, the way that it's set up, the way that it's worked, and then we have the things that we internalize. So we internalize the idea that it's not safe for us to ask for more. It's not
Mm,
safe for us to challenge the status quo because look, it works. So if we come along and start saying, well, actually, I want more pay or I want more flexibility or I would, I want these certain perks that will help me to do my job. We internalize the idea of becoming that woman. And there's all sorts of like
mm.
terms leveled
Yep.
at us, right?
Yeah.
For being,
Yeah, those are
that
rolling
woman
through
is
my
one of
head,
them.
Michelle, as you said that.
Yeah, exactly. We won't say them out loud, but I'm
Yeah.
sure listeners will know exactly what we're talking about. And part of the problem with this is that we generally, as women, especially women of color as well, we are socialized to not put ourselves at the center of what we're asking for. We're socialized to think about other people, to think about the team, think about your family, think about the workplace, your colleagues,
Mm.
think about, the system, as it were. And, we are completely lost in there. And then, the idea of saying to a recruiter or saying to a manager, actually, 3% pay rise, I think I deserve better because of this, and this. So many people are like, oh, I can't possibly do that. And the what ifs come.
Yeah,
What if
it's
they
funny,
say
even when
no?
you just said that, Michelle, like my stomach actually like clenched a little bit, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that feeling is so real. Just think, what? I can, oh, no, not me. Oh, no, I couldn't possibly do it. And we worry. We worry about what people will say, what will they think, how will this impact future relationships going forward. We worry about everything and anything, but not ourselves. We don't put ourselves forward, which is why so many of us find it difficult to be that person that says, actually, what you're offering, I want more, or I want something different, or I want it on my terms. So there's a systematic issue around who gets rewarded and why, and then there's the personal, the things that we've inherited, and they feed into each other so much.
That's really interesting. So part of it's within ourselves, and then part of it's really the system. I love that because it's really a balance, and both are really tough.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I love the conversation piece. So Michelle, you probably don't know this about me, but I started my career working in manufacturing and engineering and different roles like that. And about 3 years ago, I made a very deliberate move to a commercial, more of a commercial type role. And you'll laugh, Michelle, because the main reason I did that was because I felt like it was horrible at negotiation. And I felt like the only way to get better at negotiation was to take a role that was very outside my comfort zone that required negotiation. So was requiring negotiation with suppliers and contracts and such. So there was no way to get around it. So I really want to talk about negotiating that. I'm going to call it perfect, although there's probably no perfect career package. But negotiating any career package can be really uncomfortable. And now I think I'm a little more comfortable with it. But even when you said that just a few minutes ago, my stomach was like, oh. What guidance could you provide to our listeners on navigating that really delicate conversation, to your point, trying not to negatively impact future relationships?
Yeah. I think the first thing I would say is to be really clear on why you're doing it and to know what the purpose of this is. Because as you probably know, negotiation conversations are not easy. And it can be
Mm-hmm.
really easy to be kind of buffered emotionally, like from one wall to another, and just going
Yep.
from, I can do this to, oh my God, I want to crawl under a rock and
Yeah.
not have to face
Please
this
let me not have to
conversation.
get out of bed that morning, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Please let Zoom fail so I don't have to have this conversation.
Exactly.
So, in those moments of the highs and lows of the emotions, you need to have that grounding as to why it is that you're doing it. And the reason that I always advise this is because I think so many people, they forget themselves in this conversation. And the reality is that whatever you're negotiating for in your workplace, in your business, the root causes of it are never going to be anything bad. Even if you're saying, I want more money, that's fine. Why do you want more money? And I'm
True.
sure you can find some good things that you're going to do with that money, even if the good thing is just for you so that you feel good. What is wrong with that? There are so many men out there who do that, so why can't you? So it's really important to get connected to that purpose to kind of help you feel like you have a steady foundation as the emotions might be kind of going up and down in the thought of doing it and preparing to do it. And the second thing I would say, and this is super important, is that you are going to get no's, right? If it was easy and you always got yeses, then everybody would be doing it and this would not be a conversation. But the
True.
reality is that the more often you put yourself out there for the things that you want, you're going to get no, you're going to get pushback, you're going to get people who don't want that for you or don't have the authority to give it to you or just don't think that it's the right thing for you. There's lots of reasons why you might get no's, but it's just part and parcel. So understanding and accepting that that is very normal is a huge part of being
Mm.
prepared for those
I could
conversations.
see that, Michelle, because then you're less likely to internalize it. If you expect more no's, if you go in expecting everybody's going to be like, "Oh yeah, great, sure, well we're going to do that," then you're going to internalize it and say, "What's wrong with me? Why won't they agree with what I've asked for, or at least part of it?"
Yeah, yeah. And so often the no is never about you. It's about whatever's going on, for them. So, you might negotiate with your line manager for a pay rise. They might feel really uncomfortable talking about money. So they just try to stop the conversation. They might not know the process and they're embarrassed to admit that they don't know the process, or they think it's really long-winded, or they feel that it's triggering because they never asked for a pay rise and they don't
Mm.
want you to have one. There's so
No,
many
good
things.
point.
Yeah, there's so many things that could be going on for them. I've got absolutely nothing to do with you, but then you're sat in the corner going, "Oh, it's because I don't deserve it. My self worth is being questioned here. I should never have asked. Now they hate me," and all of this type of
Yeah.
stuff. But no is just information. A good friend of mine said, "No means next opportunity." So treat
Ooh,
it
I
as
love
data.
that. No means next opportunity.
Opportunity.
Listeners, write that down. But I also like that no is just information. I love that one as well. It's really just feedback. It's just a feedback loop.
Exactly. And then you get to decide what you do with that information. Okay, so I got a no. Check in with yourself. Okay, but what does that mean for me? Does that mean that I want to try again in 6 months' time and work on, upskilling in some way? Does it mean that I feel that I can't go any further here? So maybe I need to be looking elsewhere. Do I need to change tack? Do I need to ask for something else? Now that they said no, am I even sure that the thing that I asked for is what I really wanted? Because you know how it is sometimes you want something so much, then the opportunity comes up, and then you're like, oh, actually, I don't know why I asked for that. I didn't, it's not what I really wanted.
I just thought I wanted it. No, maybe never mind.
Yeah, but again, it's just information because then you can decide what to do next. Whereas if you never ask, you're acting on the basis of stories. Whereas if you do ask, and even if you get a no, you can act upon that data. You can act upon that information.
Yeah, I really love that. I love that no is just information because I think we often see no, at least for me, is that final end state, right? And it isn't. It's just a piece of data along the way that should feed whatever your next step is. I love that. That's my huge learning already, Michelle.
Brilliant, brilliant.
Yeah. And I just love what you're doing with equality pays. I really think it's so much needed in this world. And if I could, I would port you over here to the States because I think we need more of this here. Um, How tell me a little bit more about the company. How are you and your team making an impact, and what type of services are you offering that's helping to close gender and ethnicity pay gaps?
Yeah, so I'm big on stories and helping organizations to understand why they have pay gaps, what that means for them, and then to help them make action plans. So I don't know if you know, but in the UK, organizations that have 250 people or more, they have to report on their gender pay gaps every year. So every
I did
April,
not know that. Interesting.
yes,
Okay.
yes,
Oh wow. So they're especially incentivized to talk to folks like you.
yes, now they are. Before they were like, we don't want to talk to you.
And when did that go into effect, Michelle?
That came into effect in 2017 or 2018. So it's still
Okay.
fairly new. So
Okay.
every April, that information is published. It's published on the government website, and then organizations are encouraged to publish it on their website as well. So anybody can download the data, have a look to see what their pay gaps are, and organizations are encouraged to, flesh out the data, so tell the story of what it means, and then give some ideas around what their action plans are going to be. And so this is where I come in. So I help organizations, once they have all of that data, I help them to understand what that means for them as an organization, because it will be different for each company. And I
Mm.
help them produce an action plan, working on what things they can put in place to help close those pay gaps.
Now, is that part of the, I'm going to call it statute or law? I'm not sure the right term as well, that they're supposed to do action plans, or is that just part of what organizations are choosing to do?
It's not part of the legislation in the
Okay.
UK, no. But in Ireland, they are in the process of putting this legislation into law, and one of the recommendations is that companies have to put in action plans. Because as you can probably guess, there'll be some organizations who are really good at this and some who literally just print the numbers and then it's up on the website and they've complied, and that's as
Right.
much as they need to
Because
do.
I'm actually really thinking about the story that you started out with. So I know that was your personal story, but you had information, and because you weren't sure what to do with it, you did nothing with it, right? So
Yeah.
this is really that on a company wide scale, right? Okay, I've published my information, great, but if we're going to move the needle at all, so to say, then we have to do something with it.
Yeah, yeah. And what's really interesting about having that data, obviously, the first year it came out, it was like really big news, because what it revealed is every single sector had gender pay gaps.
Hmm.
And it was so interesting to see, because so many people were horrified. They were like, but we've got all of these laws and we have gender equality. And there was this idea that everything was fine. And then this data revealed that no, there's pay
Oh,
gaps in every single sector.
interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't news to me because I work in this industry, but it was interesting seeing the headlines, absolute outrage at this information that's been put
Right.
out. But
Yeah,
it's
I
really
think the United
powerful.
States needs to catch up clearly.
But it's really powerful because, as I say, knowledge is power, and once you have that information, you can do something with it. And I know that the Equality and Human Rights Commission did some research to see, what was the impact, and what they found was that 6 in 10 women who were job hunting were using these pay gap reports as part of their data gathering exercise to think about who they want to work for next. And I also know that people would be asking questions in their interviews and onboarding sessions. Your pay gap is this. What are you doing about it? So it's really powerful for people to
Hmm.
use to make
But
decisions around
yeah.
their career that may, again, they didn't have that information before. They couldn't have asked these questions.
Well, and part of negotiation, obviously, is if you can. I think this as an engineer, which makes me in some ways a little better negotiator, is going in with data, right? So that's part of the data package that folks they are able to use as they're choosing companies. To your point, and then maybe even as they're negotiating their own salary package for themselves.
Yeah, yeah.
Interesting.
And smart employers, are employers who know what their data says and why it says that, and are well versed in understanding what they're doing about it, so they can talk confidently to new recruits and to existing staff around what they're doing as well.
Oh, I love that. So do you do anything with, one-on-one coaching or even maybe groups or more to the individual versus a company?
Yeah, so I do quite a bit of one-to-one coaching because what I tend to see is that people will come to me and say, I have a negotiation conversation coming up and they want coaching prior, or they've had one and it's gone horribly wrong and they're trying to figure out what they want to do next. And sometimes the horribly wrong aspect is, they were unprepared and, the
Mm,
emotions might have got the better of them. But sometimes it's the other way. It's about their employer, like what their employer has said to them, how the employer's handled the conversation.
mm,
And they may feel, that they can't progress or they're questioning their self-worth. So, I find that, there are a myriad of different emotions and different aspects to negotiation
interesting.
that people need help with. And they want that kind of one to one to be able to kind of throw things out and say, am I crazy for thinking this, or is this normal, and what's right,
Right.
etc.
Yeah, one of the things I learned about negotiation is I thought everybody just got in a room and had, hashed it out, so to say. But there's so much preparation. If you're going in for a major negotiation, you really need to be prepared. And you need to be prepared with, to your point, like what do I want out of this and why? To your original point. And then what do I really want out? Like kind of in priority, right? And what am I going to start out asking for? What is my sweet spot and where is my walk away? And that sounds so easy, Michelle, but it is not, especially that walk away point. I got pushed many times on that by my executive leadership on, is that really your walk away point? Right. So, but there's so much preparation that goes into that process. You don't just jump on a phone call and have a successful negotiation, not one that's critical. I'm sure you would probably agree with that.
Yeah,
Yep.
definitely. And there's the
Yep.
emotional and mental preparation as well, because I think that
Oh, true.
gets
That's a great point. Yep.
underestimated. The mindset space that you need to be in, because remember, you're pushing against the status quo, you're putting yourself first, and that can be really scary. And this is part of the reason I always say to people to practice, because you don't know how you're going to be in the moment.
Mm,
Is your throat going to go dry? Are you a crier? Do you need to have notes in front of you?
yep.
What practical things do you need to kind of bring the emotion from above your head to be a bit more level, so you
That's a
can
really good
articulate
point.
articulate yourself. And I always say to people, you can cry afterwards, you can have your glass of wine, and you can rant and rave afterwards, but you need to be able to do it in the moment.
Mm.
But do it from a place of being able to articulate yourself rather than just like rushing to get through it because you're so nervous.
I never thought about that, but I think you're right. There's just as much, I'm going to call it like data prep or business prep, but there's probably just as much, if not more, mental prep for yourself going into that, especially if it's not something you're comfortable with normally. Wow.
Yes.
Okay. There's my learning. There's number 2, Michelle. There's my big learning for today. So, where are you and the team going next with the quality pays? What's next on the horizon for you?
Yeah, well, it's funny you should mention that because, as you know, there's tons and tons of information out there for individual women, which I totally love because there's definitely a need for women to upskill themselves in this space. But one of the things that's kind of been bugging me recently is the idea of placing so much emphasis on women stepping up, asking questions, negotiating. And I suddenly kind of thought, well, hold on, we could have a generation of women who are amazing negotiators, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to get what they want, especially when
Because
there's
there's the other
research.
party, right? There's a person on the
Yeah,
other side of the table.
exactly. And there is research to suggest that, a lot of women do negotiate, but they get much more pushback and much more resistance. And so one of the things that I'm working on now is actually upskilling individual line managers, and employers in how to hold, bias-free professional pay-related conversations and career progression conversations. Because remember when I said to you, when somebody says no, there are 1,001 things going on in the background. Well, what if we can control for some of those things? What if we can equip managers to feel comfortable talking about money, to have a framework that they can rely on so that when it's bonus time, performance time, pay review time, they have a structure that doesn't have bias in it, so that they know what it is that they're working on, rather than deciding, well, I like him, I don't really like her, I don't want to give it to her, I want to give it to him. Because,
Hmm.
otherwise we're going to have, a lot of women who are doing the emotional work and the legwork of asking, but a lot of employers who are not meeting them halfway. And so we're not seeing the results that we want. And again, it's a way to help organizations close their pay gaps if they have, much more structured conversations that are bias free. And it helps them retain talent because, as you know, people will go elsewhere if they're not being validated in the way that they want in their current workplace.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I was just sitting here thinking the same thing, retaining talent and then also recruiting the best talent, because it sounds like in the UK, women are starting to use that as part of their question. So they're evaluating an organization and a leadership team based on that information. So they may choose, hey, your pay gap's way too wide for me, and it's not something I'm willing to consider. And they could be a rock star in their field. So that company may lose out before they even have a chance to land that particular person.
Yes, most definitely. So there's definitely some, legacy issues and brand and PR issues, as well as it being good for business and, like you say, recruitment and retention as well.
Are you seeing a lot of pull from businesses either in the UK or the broader European countries for your services? Is it the demand starting to grow for you?
Well, I've always been very UK focused because obviously
Okay. Okay.
that's where I'm based. But I have had a couple of US companies start to reach out to have
Oh, we're
conversations.
finally waking up over here. There you go.
Yes,
The other side of
yeah,
the
yeah.
pond is waking up.
Yes, it's a slow trickle. Every so often, I get a request for a conversation come in. So yeah, it's starting to broaden out a little bit now. Yeah.
So I'm gonna give you your PR right here. So if I have companies that are listening to this podcast right now, you need to contact Michelle, and we'll go through that here in just a few minutes, because we all need help with this, both the companies as well as individual leaders, on how to have these conversations. So that just brings me, we're sadly, Michelle, coming to the end. I've learned so much today. Any final words of advice for our audience as they start to work on this, and particularly maybe in more technical, male dominated manufacturing fields? Any final words of advice?
Yes. I think what I would say is this work is not easy, and there are times where it can feel like you are kind of fighting a losing battle and you're not getting anywhere. What I would say is to make sure that you have good people around you to support you as you're doing this work, whether you are, an employee or a line manager, whatever your sphere of influence. Make sure that you've got good people around you. And the second thing is that, this is a time where, people are challenging the system, and when you face fierce resistance to change, it's usually, from the other person's perspective, it's usually out of fear. So don't feel that
Mm.
it's something personal, that you're not doing a good enough job and that you don't deserve things. It's not about that. It's about, changing the system, which can be slow and can be difficult, but it's definitely worth it.
Yeah, it definitely can be slow. And I think we talked about this earlier. The system pushes back hard, especially in the beginning when it's being challenged. Absolutely. Yep. So, Michelle, to that end, for folks here in the States, we need you. So maybe we can clone you and move you here to the US. But until we can make that happen, where can folks and the listeners find you out on social media, et cetera?
So the best place to find me is on LinkedIn under my name, Michelle Gymiah. So that's my favorite platform where I'd like to share, information, tidbits about what I'm working on, etc. But you can also have a look at my website, which is equalitypays.co.uk as well.
Okay, awesome. Well, Michelle, you are just a wealth of knowledge, and thank you for the work that you're doing. It's really much needed. And again, I hope you build a community, and I hope it makes its way over the ocean here to the U.S. We need more people like you in the fight. So, thank you again, Michelle, for your time, and thanks, listeners, for your time. And we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.